What is up, everybody, and welcome to CTW Live. I am your host, Seamus Zarlingo, and thank you all for joining me here tonight on CTW Live. Tonight, we're going to jump in to a couple of recent NBA topics. Now, I will say right now, in the NBA news sphere, it's very dry. All right, it's very dry. You see the date at the top, July 30th. We're going on into August. July 31st is nearly upon us, and August 1st is nearly here. And we all know at the end of July into August and into September, that's when the NBA goes to sleep. All right, we might hear about some guys traveling out to Greece, traveling out to Hawaii, traveling down to Cancun. Might see a bunch of great off-season videos of guys traveling out there and doing their thing over the off-season, whether it's working out in other countries, working out domestically, or even just enjoying their lives. That's a lot of the social media content right now when it comes to the NBA. However, there are some NBA stories from this past month that I believe we should address, and some NBA stories still very much up in the air when it comes to a couple of free agency stories, most notably with the Golden State Warriors. And tonight we're going to be starting on the Phoenix Suns. All right, because the Phoenix Suns. Now, I addressed the Phoenix Suns situation a little bit during the Kevin Durant live. I addressed their situation a little bit in the Los Angeles Clipper offseason breakdown live a couple of nights ago. But we really have to get into the Phoenix Suns. All right, because we touched on them in the past, but we really want to dive deep on what exactly the Phoenix Suns are doing right now, because I believe the Phoenix Suns are continuously putting themselves in a place that they don't want to go, right? And ultimately tonight we're going to be talking about the Suns, the Blazers, and the Golden State Warriors. Still some stories out there when it comes to the Golden State Warriors, and then of course some past stories when it comes to the Blazers and Phoenix Suns. However, let's get into the Phoenix Suns. Now, on the Los Angeles Clipper Live, right? I addressed the Phoenix Suns situation very lightly, right? And it was more so about, well, let's just face it, it was about the Suns buying out Bradley Beal. All right, it was about the Suns buying out Bradley Beal and how they were able to achieve that, right? And I explained how the Suns were able to achieve buying out Bradley Beal and stretching his contract over the next 5 seasons, but I didn't really get into why the Suns did that. And I believe the reason I didn't necessarily get into why the Suns did that is because I didn't have a great answer at the time. And to this day, I really still don't have a great answer as to why the Suns stretched Bradley Beal's contract the way they did. All right, because the Phoenix Suns ultimately, with Bradley Beal's contract, instead of paying Bradley Beal 50 plus million the next 2 seasons, they opted to pay Bradley Beal over, or nearly $20 million, I should say, nearly $20 million for the next 5 seasons. And I'm not entirely sure as to why the Suns took this route, but this is what they did with Bradley Beal's deal. Just to gloss over this and skim through what we already know, everybody go check out that live. After this one, of course, go check out that Los Angeles Clippers. It was about an hour in. We talked about Brad Stevens' presser first, and then we talked about the Clippers, but we also talked about Beal's buyout with the Suns. And this is how it reads. Ultimately, Bradley Beal gave back $13.9 million in the buyout to the Phoenix Suns. Therefore, his $110.8 million over the next 2 seasons went down to $96.9 million. And then after that, the Suns were able to stretch that $96.9 million over the course of 5 seasons for a grand total of $19.4 million in dead money per year over the next 5 seasons on the Phoenix Suns books. All right. So instead of paying Bradley Beal $53.7 million in year one and $57.1 million in year two. The Phoenix Suns now opt to pay Bradley Beal $19.4 million over the next 5 years to not play for the Suns. And let's also note this, $53.7 and $57.1 million. The Suns would have been paying that to Bradley Beal while Bradley Beal was playing for the Suns. Or, of course, if he were still to be on the Suns, right? Instead, the Phoenix Suns stretched that $110.8 million, and my bad, 96.9, right? Yep, $96.9 million. The 110 went to 96.9. Bradley Beal gave back around $14 million in his buyout. The Suns stretched that $96 million over the course of 5 seasons and now pay Bradley Beal $19.4 million per season to not play for them. So the Suns could have paid Bradley Beal an absurd amount over the next 2 seasons, and we understand how bad that deal was. Okay, Bradley Beal, that's part of the stink on Bradley Beal right now. I think he's going to be a lot better for the Clippers than people understand, because the last 2 seasons, Bradley Beal, the narrative around Bradley Beal has been, he's one of the worst contracts in the NBA. That doesn't mean he's not a valuable player. It's just contractually, he owned no value. All right, he was taking up $50+ million on the salary books for the Suns, yet he's not a $50 million player. He's just not. He's probably around a $15-20 million player, and that's where the Clippers received a bargain with Bradley Beal. $5.5 million per year for Bradley Beal over the next 2 seasons, and Bradley Beal has that player option in year 2, which means he has the chance to make further money down the line from just this $5 million he's making this year, on top of the 19.4 that he's making from the Suns. Actually, Bradley Beal, the way that stretching works, Bradley Beal will actually receive that $53.7 million next season. On the Suns books, however, it's stretched out in time. However, realistically, in real life, Bradley Beal will receive that $53.7 million, along with his $5.5 million salary with the Clippers next season. But part of the stink with Bradley Beal was, $50 million salary. If you have that salary on your books, you're not competing, because he's not worth $50 million. He's not worth the 5th highest paid salary in the NBA. That's just the bottom line with Bradley Beal. As much as I love Bradley Beal, I mean, you see the St. Louis hat here. Bradley Beal is from St. Louis. He's a hometown guy to me, right? As much as I love Bradley Beal, we have to be objective about this. We have to be real about this. Bradley Beal was not worth $50+ million. All right? That being said, is Bradley Beal, if you look at his deal, the next 2 years of that $50+ million, 53.7 and 57.1, why didn't the Suns just keep that deal around? Why didn't they just keep that deal around for the next 2 seasons? Let Bradley Beal play with the team, get some value out of him on court, and ride out the rest of the deal, instead of stretch the deal now 5 years in advance at $19.4 million. I don't understand why the Suns did that. Primarily because the Suns are not a top team in the Western Conference. The Phoenix Suns, what was the point of needing to get off Bradley Beal's deal so quickly? That is the biggest confusing point to me here with the Phoenix Suns. That's the most confusing juncture to the Phoenix Suns situation, is why the Suns felt the need to get off Bradley Beal so quickly. The Phoenix Suns, arguably, the next 2 seasons will not be competitive in the Western Conference. They just won't. All right? I would not be surprised if the Phoenix Suns finished with the 14th seed next year in the Western Conference. That is in the realm of possibilities for this Suns roster, and given the rest of the talent in the Western Conference next year within the NBA. All right? The Suns could definitely finish down there at 14, 13, below the play-in. I mean, they already finished below the play-in, and that was with Kevin Durant and Bradley Beal and a competitive roster, right? What was supposed to be a competitive roster for the Suns, as we know. The Suns already finished below the play-in last year. This next year, the Suns roster didn't get any better. I generally, we'll get into their roster here in a second. I do like, they built a little bit for the future here, the Suns did in the offseason. We'll get into that. But regardless, the Suns are not set up to win the next 2 years in the Western Conference. Why not just ride Bradley Beal's deal out the next 2 years, keep him on the roster, let him play, and then in 2 years, when that salary comes back, attack. If you're the Phoenix Suns, I don't understand why they felt the need to stretch Bradley Beal's deal out 5 years, because Bradley, and this was emulating the Bucks move with Damian Lillard. The Bucks move with Damian Lillard is much more justified because the Bucks, they're in a win now situation with Giannis. All right, Giannis Antetokounmpo. If you don't waive and stretch Damian Lillard this summer, if you're the Bucks, there are no moves. That was the last move really for the Bucks, and if it doesn't work out for the Bucks, everybody's losing their job in that front office. All right, so they had to do it. They had to do it. They had to do something, because if that deal doesn't work out for the Bucks, everybody's losing their job. But if the Bucks front office didn't do anything, everybody was losing their job. So either way, right? Either way, the Bucks had to take that risk. They had to take that risk to keep Giannis happy, to keep Giannis engaged within a winning situation. The Bucks own an excuse for why they waived Damian Lillard, well, rather stretched Damian Lillard's contract out to such an enormous degree. The Suns, I don't see the excuse. I don't see the explanation for why the Suns decided to stretch Bradley Beal's deal out for 5 seasons. To me, that only hampers the Suns 5 years down the line, when arguably they should be in a point. They should be at a point 5 years from now, the Suns, where they built this summer, right? The Suns should be at a point where they're starting to make their way into contention again, right? And it's going to be hard for the Suns because we'll mention it here already. They don't have a first round pick until 2032, or rather their own first round pick. The Suns don't have their own first round pick until 2032. All right. Now the Suns, they do own a couple of first round picks here and there from other teams with protections and stipulations, but the Suns do not own their own first round pick outright with no strings attached until 2032. So that's going to be hard for the Suns to maneuver for sure. But regardless, in the next 5 seasons, the Suns should inch towards being competitive once again. I would term right now for the Suns, however, a rebuilding, retooling period, right? I would say, are they rebuilding? Not quite. There's still a star there in Devin Booker. There are still pieces there that you could say, these are competitive veterans, right? Like a Dylan Brooks, Jalen Green. He's a younger player, but veteran in the NBA. He's been here a while. Let's face it. Royce O'Neal. I mean, you have guys on the roster, right? Grayson Allen, guys like that who have been around, and they're not necessarily rebuilding, right? They're not the Washington Wizards. They're not the Brooklyn Nets. The Phoenix Suns aren't those two teams out in the East, right? They're not the Chicago Bulls. But they're retooling, they're rebuilding, they're recalibrating after the Kevin Durant, Bradley Beal era. And for me, that I look at the trajectory of the Suns, that's within the next 2 seasons. The recalibrating era for the Suns is in the next 2 seasons. It's clearly next year when you take a step back after having Kevin Durant for the last 2.5 seasons, right? After rostering Kevin Durant for the last 2.5 seasons, after you trade him away to the Rockets for the package in which we already went over that on the KD Live over a month ago. The asset overturn of the Suns in that deal was just horrendous and set them back years, as we're seeing right now. But I'm not denying this Bradley Beal thing might have set the Suns back even further than what the Kevin Durant situation did to them. Because 2 years, to me, that's why the Suns, the next 2 years should be the recalibrating years for the Suns. Therefore, why should it matter if you have Bradley Beal under a $50 million contract or not? Obviously, Bradley Beal under a $50 million contract is going to hamper the Suns from making moves out there, whether it's trades or even, let's face it, being over the second apron, the luxury tax, the savings within that, the ownership would have been paying a lot more to those teams in the next 2 years. And let's face it too, the Suns could have been over the second apron, which would have made no sense for a team that low in the Western Conference standings, right? So you have those things to consider. But what the Suns, these recalibrating years, what was the point of getting rid of Bradley Beal so quickly? And I kind of just said it right there. It was probably luxury tax savings at the end of the day. Let's face it. But when it comes to team building, right? Team building, the Suns in 5 years from now will be paying Bradley Beal $19.4 million on their books. 5 seasons from now. I don't think people understand how insane this will be in 4 years. I mean, 4 years ago, we were sitting in 2021. So we're talking about 2021 right now, coming off of COVID, right? COVID. 2022 was the the year where things really started to open up again, right? 2021 was still very much a COVID year. 2020 was complete lockdown. 2021 was a little, we're coming out of it a little bit. That seemed like forever ago. All right. 2021 seems like forever ago. All of a sudden, it was 4 years ago, but it seems like forever ago. 5 years from now, right? 5 years from now, 4 years from now. Well, I'm just, doing the 4 year example. 4 years from now, the Bucks and Suns will both be paying Damian Lillard and Bradley Beal, and they'll have to pay those guys for another season. So this is like looking back at really the COVID season, 2019-20, the shortened season for in modern times now, if we're looking back 5 years. I use the 4 year example for whatever reason, the plus 1 year on that. But 5 years, you're looking back at the COVID era. You're looking at the bubble, right? That's a long time ago, right? That would be a team back then waving and stretching a player and still paying him to this day. Or rather, the last season would have been the 24-25 season would have been the last year they were paying him, right? So the Suns are paying Bradley Beal $19.4 million. And let's see, that would be what? Let's get the exact season on that one. So that would be what? 1, 2, 3, 4, 29, 30? All right. So the Suns are paying Bradley Beal. They're paying Bradley Beal $19.4 million in the season of 29-30. 29-30. I mean, I just say that and it's like, whoa, that's the 2020s are no longer here, right? The Suns will be paying Bradley Beal into the 2030s, folks. They'll be paying Bradley Beal into the 2030s. And I don't necessarily understand the strategy behind that other than the luxury tax savings point, right? That data point, that bullet point. That's ultimately why the Suns did what they did. It's to save some money within the ownership's pockets, right? I mean, the luxury tax bill is coming straight out of the ownership's pockets, right? The entire salary cap that a team's awarded, that's league revenue that players are paid with, right? But then once you go over the luxury tax line, you're paying a tax if you're ownership. You're paying the tax for every dollar over that luxury tax line straight out of your pocket. That's not league revenue. That's straight out of the owner's pocket. Now, it might be team revenue. The revenue is going to come from somewhere. Could come from Microsoft, as we've seen with the Clippers before, right? But that money is ultimately coming out of the owner's pockets. So the Suns, that's where I can draw some sense out of this, right? Some sense is the Suns were likely looking at the situation going, we want to save some money here with Bradley Beal because otherwise we'll be paying a pretty penny to a team that isn't competitive, right? But in doing that, the Suns have arguably set themselves back even further, which right now it's extremely interesting to see the Suns go from we're ready to spend on this team. The Suns were essentially one of the most expensive teams of all time, and we're in that era right now too, where every year we see the most expensive team of all time. But the Suns were one of the most expensive teams of all time the last couple of seasons with Kevin Durant on the roster, and now all of a sudden the Suns, because of this position they put themselves in, they are now in a spot where they are hampering their team building to cut costs for the future. That is, I mean, that is the domino effect of moves a team makes that turn out to be grand mistakes, which in this scenario with the Suns, it's the Kevin Durant move. It's the Bradley Beal move. Those two moves were absolute mistakes for the Phoenix Suns. Absolute mistakes. And this is the domino effect. This is the domino effect because now the Suns, they're cutting costs with Bradley Beal, and now they're going to be paying him $19.4 million in 29-30. That is going to undoubtedly, later on down the line, that is going to hold the Suns back. That is going to hold the Suns back from attaining future assets and adding to their roster in a time period where they should be theoretically becoming competitive once again once they've recalibrated from what this Kevin Durant situation was in Phoenix. And that's just, unfortunately, Phoenix is they're on that list of teams that just can't get out of their way, right? Where we've seen them in the toilet for most of the 2010s, right? Phoenix made a couple of runs there. The bubble, well, that was 2020, but in 2010, right? Or rather the 2010s, you have Steve Nash at the beginning of the 2010s. However, that's really more of the 2000s, and a little bit there at the beginning of the 2010s with Steve Nash. After that, you have the Goran Dragic era, which is basically, the Suns, they almost made the playoffs, but they didn't, right? And then you have just the tanking Phoenix Suns at the back half of the decade. The Suns just not been a very good organization for the past 15 seasons. And yes, there was a season in there where they made the finals. There was a season in there where they topped 64 wins in the league's best win total. But even that season, they go out in the second round. They don't win the finals the year before. And then they follow it up with the Kevin Durant deal, knee-jerking that, trading away Cam Johnson, Mikal Bridges, a million picks for Kevin Durant. They go out in the second round to the Nuggets. They go out in the first round to the Wolves. And then they don't make the playoffs. So the Suns, they're that team, right? They're one of those teams in the NBA. I tend to think the group of teams, right? It's like the Timberwolves, it's the Suns, it's the Kings, it's the Wizards. They just can't get out of their way, right? For one reason or the other, whether it's front office leadership, ownership, whatever it is, they just can't get out of their own way. The Suns right now, I mean, the domino effect is happening from those terrible moves. The Kevin Durant and Bradley Beal moves, right? But Bradley Beal, I would have, if I were the Suns, I understand. Next 2 seasons, yeah, you want to pay a little bit less in luxury tax within the luxury tax bill, right? If you're the Suns in the next 2 seasons, you want to pay a little bit more. You want to pay a little bit less to the luxury tax bill, right? I understand that point. But then at the same time, 3 seasons extended from those 2 years, right? These 2 years are supposed to be recalibrating years. Why couldn't the Suns just cut bait other places, right? Why couldn't they, if you look at their roster, right? The Phoenix Suns roster, it's not that great of a roster. I mean, you have Devin Booker, Jalen Green, Dylan Brooks, Royce O'Neal, Mark Williams. You have Iguodaro, Dunn, both rookies from last year. Malawach, rookie this year, right? Nick Richards, Rasheer Fleming, another rookie. Nick Richards not, Rasheer Fleming rather is. You have Nigel Hayes-Davis, who the Suns just brought over from overseas, former college star at Wisconsin, as we all know. Jordan Goodwin, hometown kid here, hometown kid from Cahokia. Jared Butler and Colin Gillespie. And then you have Livers, Huntley, and Brea on 2-way deals. But the Suns roster right now, I understand with the luxury tax bill, right? You want the ownership wants to save money on the luxury tax bill. But the rest of the roster, what exactly, why, who on this roster, specifically the back end or even the front end of the roster, who is important enough right now for the Suns? Who is important enough for the Suns to look at Bradley Beal and go, we need to cut bait with him. We need to cut bait with him in order to save money on the luxury tax bill and not the back half of the roster. Right? That, like, I don't completely understand why the Suns couldn't just ride out Bradley Beal's deal, even considering the luxury tax implications. The Suns could have still put themselves in a world where they were paying less to the luxury tax bill and got themselves under certain apron, whether it's the second apron, first apron, even the luxury tax line, right? The Suns could have created a world where they still achieve that with Bradley Beal on the roster. And that's where I just cannot understand why the Suns decided to do what they did. I don't understand why the Suns put themselves back even further. I mean, the Suns now arguably made their situation worse for the foreseeable future. They already have no picks. All right. Already went over that earlier. Phoenix does not own their first round pick outright with no strings attached until 2032. And now Phoenix will own less salary room to utilize for 5 years in advance instead of 2 when the team wasn't going to be competitive anyway. So again, that's what I want to give out here is the Suns, right? They're going to have less money 5 years in advance from now. And particularly the 3 years that I'm looking at past the 2 years, right? The next 2 years, you're going, they saved some money. But it's the 3 years extended off those 2 years, right? It's year 3, it's year 4, it's year 5. In year 3, 4, and 5, the Suns should be inching back towards competitiveness again. contender status again. Instead, $19.4 million of Bradley Beal's salary will be on the books for the Suns at that point in time. And the Suns will own less salary room to actually build their roster in year 3, 4, 5 of the stretch provision used on Bradley Beal. Instead of, again, the next 2 years just riding out the $50+ million the next 2 years, when the Suns, they're not going to be competitive anyway. All right, well, I just listed out their roster. This is not a team in the Western Conference that's going to compete next year. All right, they're going to be. Look, I want to call every team, like every team could be a frisky, right? They could be frisky. They could be a little bit frisky with Devin Booker, and you do have a starting lineup of Devin Booker, Jalen Green, Dylan Brooks, Royce O'Neal, and Mark Williams, or Malawach. Who knows who starts there, right? And Grayson Allen could be in that starting lineup too. Who knows on certain occasions. But even looking like that, I'm sorry, that team is not. I would be shocked if the Suns make the play-in. Now, you could see other teams in the Western Conference, injuries, underperform, like the Pelicans last year, right? The Pelicans arguably were a top, I want to say top 8 roster at least. They were a playoff roster last year, the Pelicans were. And the injuries, look at all the injuries the Pelicans went through. The Pelicans had one of the more underwhelming seasons of any team. Of every team last year. I would say the Pelicans took the cake on that one. So you could have that in the Western Conference again. The Pelicans were that example last year, but you could have a couple teams. The Spurs wound up being that team near the end of the year. You could see a couple teams slip in the Western Conference, and maybe Phoenix takes their spot. But ultimately, the talent on the Phoenix roster, it should go no further than the 8 seed. In my mind, I don't think this is a top 8 roster in the West. Top 8 roster, that entails you're a playoff team in the West, but that also entails you're in the top half of the Western Conference. This is a bottom half of the Western Conference team, if not the 14th seed in the conference. What if they're the 15th seed? I'm penciling in the Jazz to be the 15th seed right now out West. But the Suns, if it really goes wrong, if Booker gets hurt, right? If something like that were to happen, if Booker misses any time, let's just face it. If Devin Booker misses any time with this roster, that is when you could see the Suns slip down to that 15th spot in the Western Conference. But that's where the Suns are. All right, that's where the Suns are right now. We're going to come out with predictions for the season in a couple weeks here. Once September gets a little closer, once we get a little closer to the season, maybe a couple of things in free agency shake out the way they're, a little bit more than we see right now. But we'll make all our predictions later. I think I'm going to have the Phoenix Suns probably 14th in the West. Just looking at every team, just early returns, I'm going 14th in the West. The next 2 seasons, the Suns are not going to be competitive. Why not just ride out Bradley Beal's deal? I just don't. I that would have been the best thing for the Suns in the long term when it comes to team building and becoming competitive at a time where it matters, right? Instead, the Suns, they're stretching Bradley Beal's deal to save money right now. That money saved right now, it's here's where I also look at it too. Sometimes you got to bet on the future. The Suns, if they're competitive in 5 years, right? You could be making back the money via team revenue in 5 years that you theoretically spent on Bradley Beal. Now, if they still had Bradley Beal, that you theoretically spent on Bradley Beal this season in luxury tax bill payments, right? Does anybody follow that, right? Where in 5 seasons, or in rather 3 seasons, 4 seasons, 5 seasons, really 3, 4, 5. In years 3, 4, 5, the Suns, they could have made that luxury tax bill payment in the next 2 years with Bradley Beal if the Suns were even over the luxury tax. Because there were ways the Suns could have maybe dipped under that luxury tax line if they kept Bradley Beal. It would have been a little hard, but there were ways. There are always ways, right? And the Suns, even considering if they were over, say we're under this scenario, if they were over the luxury tax bill, the luxury tax threshold, if they're paying towards the luxury tax bill, you could easily make that money up in team revenue if the team is good in years 3, 4, 5 of stretching Bradley Beal's deal. Yet now the team will be paying $19.4 million to nobody in those seasons. And I went over it with the Damian Lillard situation in the Bucks. And again, the Bucks, they own a definitive excuse as to why they did what they did with Damian Lillard. The Bucks own a definitive excuse as to why they waived and stretched Damian Lillard. There's not much of an excuse for why the Suns waived and stretched Bradley Beal outside of luxury tax savings. But I mentioned this with Damian Lillard, right? That situation. Damian Lillard, he's taking up $22.5 million. Bradley Beal, he's taking up $19.4 million. We already know those salaries right there, just point blank. Those salary numbers could be a starting caliber player. That should be a starting caliber player on your roster. I mean, Herb Jones just received around $22 million per year from the Pelicans. So Herb Jones, I mean, that's the level of player you can receive for that amount of money if you're the Bucks or the Suns, right? Or you could split that money up and say, oh, you get if you're paying $19.4 million, could you get two $10 million players essentially with that $19.4 million? Two Luke Cornett's, right? A Luke Cornett and a Sam Hauser, make that comparison. Those are the players the Suns and Bucks are going to miss out on in time, right? They're going to be missing that. Oh, we don't have a Herb Jones because we're paying that $22 million to Damian Lillard if you're the Bucks, or we don't have that Luke Cornett and Sam Hauser for the Suns because we're paying that $19.4 million to Bradley Beal. So that's gonna simply, I mean, that just alone right there, that is going to hamper teams from building further, specifically the Bucks and the Suns. And we're on the Suns right now because the Suns offseason, I honestly, looking at Phoenix's entire offseason, outside of the Suns waiving and stretching Bradley Beal's contract to, I again, just to save to save on the luxury tax bill. Outside of that move, the Suns offseason was okay for the spot they were at. Okay. Last year, the Suns 11th seed in the West, clearly underwhelming. Outside of the Pelicans, right? The Pelicans, they had, again, with the excuses and the explanations, but the Pelicans, they were injured, right? The Suns weren't necessarily injured. They were just bad, right? The Suns were underwhelming because they were just bad. There were no health concerns, nothing. They were just bad last year. The Suns were coming off 2 seasons this summer. Coming into this summer, the Suns were coming off 2 seasons where they just failed. Okay, they just failed. The vibes, talk about the vibes, but they were bad with the Phoenix Suns. And they were in a not impossible spot, but a spot where they were paying 3 players who didn't necessarily mesh and mold and fit together. They were paying those 3 players $50+ million each: Kevin Durant, Bradley Beal, and Devin Booker. And we saw on court a little bit redundant towards each other, not a true alpha leader within. I understand people will go to war for Devin Booker, but we've talked about it on the broadcast. Is he that leader? I'm not so certain. I don't know. But it just seems as if those 3 players, the locker room around them, not very happy. Those 3 players weren't happy, and the locker room around them wasn't very happy, right? So the Suns this summer, they were going into a situation where they knew, okay, we went for the title the last, basically, 2021 to 2025, basically, right? So 2021 to 2025, that was the window of contention for the Suns. And you'd argue the real window of contention was 21 to 23, because 21, the Suns made the finals. We're up 2-0 in the finals. The Suns could have definitely won the finals in 2021. The Suns could have definitely won the finals in 2022. They own the best record in the league, 64 wins. It almost seemed like a foregone conclusion that year until the Mavericks knocked the Suns out. Even the Suns, they were up 3-2 in that series against the Mavericks. Mavericks come back and of course, we all know the story there. Whoop them in Game 7 at Phoenix, which is one of the more embarrassing losses we've ever seen a team sustain in NBA history. But the Suns could have won the finals in 2022. And 2023, people underrate that year, but the Suns, they just traded for Kevin Durant. And the league was fairly wide open in 22-23. When the Denver Nuggets won the title that year, the league was wide open, and the Suns were arguably the hardest team the Nuggets, rather, had to face on their way to a title in terms of seeding. right? The Nuggets faced an 8 seed in round 1, a 4 seed in round 2, that was the Phoenix Suns, a 7 seed in round 3, and an 8 seed in the finals. So the Nuggets, seeding wise, their toughest opponent was technically in the second round against the Phoenix Suns. And the Phoenix Suns actually took them to the most games. The Suns took them to 6 games. The Suns took the Nuggets to 6 games. The Nuggets played 5-game series or less against all those other teams, the Timberwolves, the Lakers, and the Heat. So the Suns very much had a chance to win the title in 2023 as well. And if they would just won that Nuggets series in 2023, which it was a little farther away, it wasn't as close, right? 6 game wasn't quite that close. Right? I mean, anytime you make it to a 6 game, you can force a 7th game, and anything can happen in game 7. Wasn't necessarily that close. Felt like the Nuggets had the hold on the series. There were some moments where it flipped one way or the other, but the Suns 21, 22, 23. Those are their real contending years. 24, 25 are supposed to be years of contention because when you are rostering a 35-plus-year-old Kevin Durant and you trade as many assets as the Suns did for Kevin Durant, you expect to compete with Kevin Durant specifically for the title. And the Suns, we all know the last 2 seasons completely failed in that respect. Completely failed. Wound up as the 6th seed, wound up as the 11th seed. So the Suns' last 2 years, they went for that title push and they failed. All right, they failed. Now, going into this offseason, as the Celtics, as we're seeing with the Celtics as well, the Celtics were another team. Their contending window was basically 2022 to 2025. Celtics are taking a step back. The Suns, going into the summer, they knew they were going to take a step back. That's the whole point here. And for the entire situation the Suns are currently in, I didn't think they did too bad with their summer. All right, other than confusingly stretching Bradley Beal's deal the way they did. All right, for luxury tax saving purposes, I didn't think the Suns did all that bad. All right, because the Suns on draft night, they landed Mark Williams, and they landed Mark Williams for a price that was under the Lakers' price. All right, it was fairly under the Lakers' price, although it was around the same because the Lakers, Dalton Connect and a 2027 first. The Suns, I believe, traded a 2025 first that became Liam McNeely on draft night to the Hornets. And I believe they traded a future first in 2029, if I'm not mistaken. Might have to check that. Might have to fact check me. I believe it was a future first round pick. So it was about the same. So it was about the same market for Mark Williams as what the Lakers paid for him. I mean, people could argue which deal is a little more valuable if you like Dalton Connect or not. But the Suns trade for Mark Williams, and that's a deal to me that I like for the Suns because it fills a definitive need for the Suns. Giving up a future first round pick for Mark Williams, the Suns don't have too many of those. That could be a questionable move later on in time. We've talked about Mark Williams on here at nauseum before. He's just not available that often. He's, compared to another Williams out there who's a center, Robert Williams, right? Mark Williams is sort of comparable to Robert Williams, where you can see the uber talent that exists in Mark Williams, yet the question is always, is he going to be available? And we all know availability is the best ability. If you're not on court, you can't produce. Robert Williams played 26 games the last 2 seasons. Mark Williams played a lot more than that, but he definitely owns the track record of can this guy play consistently, which if we actually look at his basketball reference as we go to that, his career, Mark Williams has never played over 44 games. So he played 44 games last season. That was his high for his entire career. It's only been 3 seasons, but 19 games in 23-24 and 43 games in 22-23, in which was his rookie season. So Mark Williams, he's available less than half of the time. And he's never played in the playoffs before, so never made a playoff run. No data there of Mark Williams contributing to a playoff team. But the availability of Mark Williams is a concern. That being said, you can see the upside there. I'm not sure why the market was what it was for Mark Williams. 2 first-round picks seems a little much to me for Mark Williams, but the Suns needed a center, and they capitalized on the Hornets basically fire sailing their center rotation for whatever reason. I'm a little confused as to why the Hornets were doing that this summer too. They got rid of Nurkic, got rid of Nick Richards last year, got rid of Mark Williams, and the Hornets. I want to say there was another name in there. The Hornets also got rid of, if I'm not mistaken. I'm not really sure that name. Might be thinking of another team here, but rather the Phoenix Suns. They received Mark Williams. I somewhat like that deal. Which let me get the actual Mark Williams deal correct. All right, because I don't want to misspeak here. Okay. It was exactly what I said. 29th pick in the 2025 NBA draft, which turned into Liam McNeely, and a 2029 first round pick, which I'm assuming, let's see. I'm trying to find where that pick actually comes from. It's probably beside the point here. But regardless, 2 first round picks for Mark Williams. Is that a little high? Maybe I wouldn't have paid that much for Mark Williams. But that being said, the Suns did own a definitive need at center, as we all knew last season. And they went out and got 3 solid centers they could lean on. Okay. I am not mad at the Suns center core right now. I'm really not. And when I say center core, I mean the big man core, right? Mark Williams, Malawach, Nick Richards. I like all 3 of them. Okay, Mark Williams, Kalman, Malawach, and Nick Richards. I think the Suns built a pretty formidable front line. Okay, they built a pretty formidable front line. Also, I'm going to answer this real quick. I'm going to answer this. I'm going to answer this right here. What is my ex? At Seamus Zarlingo. But right here, it's not spelled like this. It's Seamus. So at Seamus Zarlingo on X. So you can go find me on there, everybody. And also just a little tidbit. No H in my name. Just an E. Just the E. Just the E after the S. Just the E. There's no, I don't know. Like there's no H. There's no H, folks. There's no H. But you can find me on X at Seamus Zarlingo. Just wanted to answer that real quick. But back to the Phoenix Suns and their big man core. Williams, Malawach, Richards. I like that front line right there for the Phoenix Suns. I mean, let's face it, the Suns last year, their front line was Yusuf Nurkic and nobody, basically. Basically nobody. And the Suns were in a spot of no center, also no point guard. I mean, I understand Tyus Jones last season, that was supposed to help, but no point guard either. And now the Suns own 3 legitimate options, and one of them Malawach. You'd think Malawach is supposed to be the center of the future for the Suns, and Mark Williams and Richards. I mean, Mark Williams and Malawach. You look at Portland, Klingon, Jan Hansen, right up in Portland. Those 2 guys, they're going to be quite the formidable front line in Portland for years to come. Could that be Mark Williams and Malawach in Phoenix? I think so. All right, I definitely think so with those 2 players. And then you go down the roster, and I like the Nick Richards deal from last year. I thought that was a good deal for the Suns. Again, with the Mark Williams, maybe a little steep of a price, but to really bring together that front line, I like that for the Suns. I really like that. To have good centers is important in the NBA. And maybe we could have that conversation on another team. Another day. We've already had that conversation. Let's face it. We've already had that conversation a million times on this team over here when it comes to centers. But you still have Royce O'Neal if you're the Suns. Still a productive veteran there. Dylan Brooks and Jalen Green, they're 2 pieces that come into the Phoenix Suns organization. They're not the most gaudy pieces, but they're going to bring something. And I think they're going to bring some attitude, specifically Dylan Brooks, that the Suns need. Okay, the Suns, they're just coming off of 2 seasons where the vibes, right? The locker room was not exactly, it didn't I mean, the Celtics played the Suns twice last year, right? Which everybody plays each other twice. But in those games, I mean, the Suns looked dead. And their morale looked dead. Okay, it was street ball out there. It was Devin Booker one-on-one. The team was not playing together. The team wasn't playing defense. The team was not playing motivated. All right. And the Suns next year, I don't expect that to be the case, especially with Dylan Brooks on the roster. I expect the Suns to come out competing next year. And even if that means they're competing for the 14th seed in the Western Conference. I still expect them to own a little more fire next year than they did in years past with Kevin Durant and Bradley Beal specifically, right? And that all is due to Dylan Brooks, his addition to the roster, but also Jalen Green too. Jalen Green's got a little umph in him as well. He got a little shoulder, like, oh, I just dunked on you, little little shoulder roll with the little flex, right? That's a little bit that's there a little bit with Jalen Green. So I got to give him his props there. And then the bench, you have Grayson Allen, Ryan Dunn, Iguodaro. Those guys right there could all contribute. Dunn, Iguodaro, you would say are supposed to be a little bit better going into next season. And then you look at kind of the back line of the bench: Fleming, Nigel Hayes, Jordan Goodwin. You guys know I love Jordan Goodwin out here. I mean, I'm going to fight for Jordan Goodwin, and I'm going to campaign for more Jordan Goodwin minutes out here with any team. I don't care if he's on the Lakers or the Suns or the Wizards or whichever team he's on, the Grizzlies, the Nets, wherever he's at. I'm going to campaign for more Jordan Goodwin minutes. But he's on the back end of the Suns bench, along with Nigel Hayes and Rasheer Fleming, and even Jared Butler. I think Jared Butler is a little bit of an underrated addition. I mean, you think about somebody who's on a bad team in Jared Butler last year with the Wizards. He kind of carved himself out a little bit of a space with that team, and then another team out in the NBA actually wanted him in the Phoenix Suns. So there's a little bit of something there with Jared Butler, and you could go down to and say, if Colin Gillespie's on the roster. Colin Gillespie's he's been around the NBA all of a sudden. He's stayed around, right? He was kind of contributed to the Suns last year. Was on the Nuggets for a couple of seasons. I believe he's a champion with the Denver Nuggets, if I'm not mistaken. But the bench for the Suns, not terrible. But again, it's not, when I'm looking at this roster, I'm not going, wow, this is a playoff team in the West. But it's a roster that's set up to give a different vibe than they did last. I mean, it's a much more well-rounded roster, all right, than the last 2 years, arguably. The last 2 years, the Suns are supposed to be competitive, but the roster was not very well-rounded. That was one of the hits against the Phoenix Suns. It was the Suns. Yes, they have Kevin Durant, they have Bradley Beal, they have Devin Booker, but they don't have a point guard. They don't have a center, right? Their center is Yusuf Nurkic. Their point guard is Tyus Jones, right? Tyus Jones, Yusuf Nurkic. They could, more specifically, Tyus Jones. Yeah, they're solid, but they're not necessarily players you want starting consistently if you're trying to win a championship. This year's roster for the Suns, farther away from winning a championship, don't get me wrong, but it's a little more well-rounded. All right. There is an influx of shooting guards, you could say, for the Suns. You have Booker, Jalen Green, Grayson Allen, Jordan Goodwin, Jared Butler there. But guys like Jordan Goodwin, Jared Butler, Grayson Allen, they could flex more so into that forward spot, per se. So they can be a little more hybrid players. And that's what teams are looking for, is hybrid players that can play both the guard and forward slot, or even the forward and big slot, right? You want to see hybrid players out on the floor. The Suns have a couple of those hybrid players. Theoretically, they're not the most robust hybrid players in the world, but they could flex up to say the 3 from the 2 if you're looking at it that way. The Suns, there's still a little bit of a lack of a ball handling presence, but I think their forward rotation is a little more formidable. I shouldn't say formidable, but a little deeper, right? A little deeper. Maybe not so much formidable, because you'd say, they really replaced Kevin Durant with Dylan Brooks. But you also on the back end, we have an update about a topic we're going to talk about later. But on the back end, you also have Rasheer Fleming. You also have Nigel Hayes, who's coming from overseas and was a very good player overseas. We cannot underrate the great players overseas, right? There's a reason guys like Nigel Hayes, Gershon Yabusele, even looking back to Daniel Tice years and years ago, there's a reason they're coming over to the NBA. They're dominating the EuroLeague. Teams look at that in the NBA and want them on their roster. Nigel Hayes with the Phoenix Suns, nobody's talking about him. He hasn't been in the American public spotlight since he was at Wisconsin last decade, essentially, before the 2020s. Went over to Europe, destroyed the EuroLeague over there, and now back with the Phoenix Suns in the NBA, or rather back in the NBA with the Phoenix Suns. And that's a player you never know what could come out of Nigel Hayes. Just saying. You never know what could happen with Nigel Hayes. And he's on the back end of the Phoenix bench. And that's a no harm, no foul type of a deal and a player to have if you're Phoenix. So Phoenix's roster, there's some young guys. Dunn, Iguodala, Malawach. Now you could say, yes, there's no premier young guy that the Suns are building around other than Devin Booker, and he's not so much young anymore. He's 28, 29 years old, and he's in his prime. But there's some young guys there. Dunn, Iguodala, Malawach. You could even say Mark Williams is in that category that you like if you're the Suns. And then the rest are players: Jalen Green, Dylan Brooks, Royce O'Neal, Grayson Allen. Could they own some trade value? Most certainly so. Or even Rasheer Fleming in that young guy conversation, another rookie for the Suns, picked at the beginning of the second round. And then the guys on the back end of the bench: Goodwin, Butler, Nigel Hayes, Nick Richards, and Gillespie. Those guys all have upside. So the Suns, they own some upside players. They own some young players they actually like. And then they own some core pieces who are going to own value, whether it's within the trade market or actually on court. So the Suns have set themselves up okay, right? The Suns have set themselves up okay for this time period. But that again goes back to the Suns. What they could have still attained somewhat of this same roster, even with Bradley Beal on the roster, and just wrote out the Bradley Beal deal and not paid Bradley Beal $19.4 million in years 3, 4, and 5 after the 2 years. The next 2 years, Suns save some money, great. But 3, 4, and 5, that's when we're really looking at that Bradley Beal deal taking hold of the Suns in a moment where they should be becoming competitive. And right now, looking at the Suns roster, they've done a good job of setting themselves up for that moment. But when that moment actually comes around, will Bradley Beal's deal, will that will that will that hold the Suns back from building a roster more competitive than what they could otherwise achieve, right? Or what they will achieve, right? And I also want to talk about this with the Phoenix Suns. Devin Booker. Okay, Devin Booker, he is a player that I feel like some players in the NBA, just for their name, just for their status on their team just shits out money for that player. All right? 100%. They just shells out money for that player. When we look at Zion in New Orleans, Trae Young in Atlanta, are these players worth $40 million for what they've been able to bring to their teams? I mean, maybe revenue wise, maybe from a jersey sales standpoint, maybe they sold tickets, but from the actual production on court, right? The actual production on court when it comes to winning basketball games, not selling jerseys, not selling tickets, winning basketball games. Has Zion Williamson and Trae Young specifically, and even Devin Booker, have they lived up to the money they're owed by their teams in the future? The Pelicans, the Hawks, and now the Suns here with Devin Booker. Because Devin Booker, all right, the last 2 seasons, it's not been amazing for Devin Booker, okay? He's been an all-star. He's been somebody that is certainly a top player in the NBA, okay? He's still a top player in the NBA. I'm not denying Devin Booker's talent, all right? But I'm just not so certain he is the player to build around. Okay, I'm not so certain. And here are the extensions Devin Booker has received from the Phoenix Suns in the last couple of years, or rather since the decade started in 2020. 5 years, $158.3 million. All right, so that covered seasons 1920, 2021, 21-22, 22-23, and 23-24. So 20, 21, 22, 23, and 24. All right. So 5 years, 158.3. That was the rookie max extension Devin Booker received. Fine. All right. We see that rookie max extension all the time. That is not anything out of the ordinary. Then the next deal, 4 years, $220.4 million. That covers the seasons of last year, 24-25, 25-26, 26-27, 27-28, and then of course just 25, 26, 27, 28. I don't know why I'm saying it like that, but you guys get the gist here. 4 years, $220.4 million per year. Or sorry, not per year, for the full contract, right? $220.4 million. On top of that, the Phoenix Suns just inked Devin Booker this summer. So those 2 extensions or rather, I mean, contracts. I mean, they were extensions, yes. The 5-year extension, that was back in 2019. The 4-year extension, that was, I want to say, that was probably around 23, 24, right? Whichever year he signed that deal. And the latest extension was just signed this summer. 2 years, $133.3 million, which covers the 29 and 30 seasons, which 28, 29, and 29, 30. So Devin Booker, my goodness, with the Phoenix Suns, the Suns are just shelling out money for Devin Booker. And I'm not convinced over the last couple of seasons that Devin Booker deserves that kind of contract. All right, because the latest contract will now pay Devin Booker, which actually let's go get the real numbers on everything here. So I have his salary numbers written down, but year by year, right? So the latest contract extension for Devin Booker, which is set to trigger in 2028, $64 million for Devin Booker in 28, 29. And then he has a player option for $69 million in 29, 30. Now we have to think about this in relevancy to the cap, because the cap will go up. Okay, so it's not as if the cap number will be the same in 29, 30 than it is right now. It's not going to be, you're paying, X percentage or a massive percentage, right? Which I'm going to say, you're going to be, if you're the Suns, you're paying the same percentage basically in those years to Devin Booker as you are all these other seasons. Okay, so it's not really changing per se. It's not really changing. But is Devin Booker worth 35% of a team's salary cap? I'm not entirely convinced that Devin Booker is worth all of that money. And maybe if you're the Suns, you're going, okay, makes Devin Booker happy in this moment where you are not competitive. And that makes a little bit of sense to me. And you want to keep that asset, and maybe the Suns don't want to move Devin Booker, but if I were the Phoenix Suns looking at their situation, I would have maybe looked to move on from Devin Booker this summer, because this is just my thing with Devin Booker. I just don't know if he's a player with his all-around skill set, right? I like Devin Booker, okay? I like Devin Booker, but I'm just not certain he is a player that you can slot in for 35% of your salary cap, right? Or 35% of the salary cap, making upwards of $60 million per year in the next couple of seasons, or rather way later on down the line. I just don't know if he is that guy. Okay? I just don't. He might. I know this is one of those tough conversations, because I think Devin Booker, for me, Devin Booker is again amongst that category of player that's gained the status of, oh well, you have to pay this player. Oh yeah, this is a top flight player, right? But is he really best slotted into being the number 3 on a championship team, right? I would say yes. There's a world where Devin Booker is a number 2 with a great number 1 star, and you could say the last 2 seasons he had Kevin Durant. Now we saw that didn't exactly work out the way it was supposed to. But I'm not the returns on Devin Booker recently. I'm just not entirely. It's the same conversation with Jaylen Brown. I can't lie. I mean, Jaylen Brown, we all know the value of Jaylen Brown in Boston, not only on court but off court. But there's also this contractual on-court value that needs to be said with Jaylen Brown, where Jaylen Brown, when he's making upwards of $60, $70 million on his contract, is he actually going to be worth that money given his actual talent? We know he's a very good player. He's a top 20 player in the NBA, the way Devin Booker is. But is that money, does that really keep you from building the team out further? And that, I mean, with Jaylen Brown, that's even considering Jason Tatum on the roster. And, Jason Tatum, the situation with him, we have no idea what he's going to look like when he comes back. But another $50 million contract there, that with Jaylen Brown, another superstar there with Jaylen Brown in Boston. Phoenix, there's not another superstar with Devin Booker, which does give the Suns some leeway to pay Devin Booker this ludicrous money. But I'm still not convinced, even if you were to put a star next to Devin Booker, right? Another great star. I'm not sure Devin Booker is worth that money. I'm not. And it's really the way I'm talking about it though right now, I will say it's kind of a situation where if I'm looking at it going, I don't know if he's worth it. A team could say that, but at the end of the day, you're just going to pay the money. Because why would you I don't really know if he's not worth. Why would you get rid of a superstar over? And when I'm talking about this, I want to say, I mean, he's paid what 35% of the salary cap, and he's paid well the next couple of years. He's paid $53.1 million next year, 57 the next year, 57.1 the next year, and then $61 million in 27-28 before his extension kicks in for 64.1 million in 28-29, and then 29-30, 69.2. So when you look at those numbers, I'm really looking at it going, oh, Devin Booker, is he more of a, $45 million player, right? Is he more of a $40 million player? Is he more in that range per se? I feel like he's a little more inching towards the 40 million than the $50 million range. And at the end of the day, is a team like the Suns specifically who's rostered Devin Booker for a long period of time now, for over 10 years, are they really going to look at that extra $10 million per year and go, let's get rid of Devin Booker? That's not going to happen. So I understand why the Suns signed Devin Booker to the deal that they did. It's kind of one of those, you just go ahead and pay the player, which this is another conversation I want to get into on this live, actually. I'm just spurring off conversations from the Suns here. But the CBA, all right, the CBA that was implemented in 2023. Teams and fans out there they love to scapegoat the new CBA, and the new CBA has turned into a buzz term, right? Fans and executives and players and everybody love to look at the new CBA and go, the new CBA has ruined this and ruined champions, and now I can't pay this guy and I can't do this. No, it's not the new CBA. The new CBA, certainly there are some implications in the new CBA that have changed things for teams 100%. I'm not denying that. But every single thing that doesn't go right for a player, a team, a fan, and when it comes to fans, players and teams, right? Every single thing that doesn't go right is blamed on the new CBA, the 2023 CBA. It's not always the CBA that puts teams back and hampers teams from building into the future, right? Prevents teams from building into the future. It's things like this, okay? It's things like the Devin Booker contract. It's things like the Zion Williamson contract, the Trae Young contract, the Brandon Ingram contract, right? Those contracts right there, teams just willingly gave out those contracts based on the status, the image of those players, and they went, Zion, Trae Young, Brandon Ingram, Devin Booker, are they really worth that money? Probably not, but they're a star. Pay them. What are we going to get rid of them? Over $10 million, over $5 million, over a Sam Hauser caliber of a player? Are we really going to get rid of Devin Booker, Brandon Ingram, Trae Young, Zion Williamson over Sam Hauser? But that is why teams are in the position they're in right now when it comes to the new CBA. All right, because they overspend on players who probably don't deserve the money that they are earning, right? The players I just listed right there, Ingram, Zion Williamson, Trae Young, Devin Booker, who've not necessarily lived up to that tier 1A of superstar in the NBA, yet they're paid as such. Those players, teams just give those players money, and then they turn around and go, where'd all the money go? I mean, it's like that meme. It's literally like that meme where the guy shoots the guy in the chair and goes, who would have done this? Who would have done this? That's what teams are on, really. I mean, that teams, fans, players, that's what happens. That's what happens. Oh, a team's not going to get rid of Devin Booker for $10 million, right? He's paid $53 million instead of $43 million. Suns aren't going to get rid of him. But then that extra money on teams' books, Like, yep, that's $10 million more for that player, and you're not going to be able to attain a player like a Sam Hauser or Luke Cornett on the back end. It's almost the same conversation as the dead money situation, right? The dead money with Bradley Beal. Teams love to blame, and everybody, let's face it, everybody, media members, I should really throw in media members to this as well. Everybody blames the new CBA. But I'm really telling people out there, look at teams' spending habits. Look at their spending habits and look at the standards, right? The standards when it comes to, oh, we see this. This is the scenario we see. This is what we're going to do. Look at the standards, the routines, and the habits of teams when it comes to paying players certain dollars. It's absolutely ludicrous to blame everything on the CBA when teams are just shelling out money for players who don't really deserve that X amount of cash. Okay. And teams, it's a players' league. It's a players' league. I mean, the NFL, that's very much an owner's league. The NBA is a players' league. We're seeing it in the salary cap figure percentage in which teams, or rather players, earn from teams. We're seeing it in the contracts players earn from teams. I will say this summer, I think there's been a little bit of a recalibration within the market because I do think, for example, a guy like Ty Jerome, right? I think Ty Jerome in previous seasons would have received 15, $20 million on the market. Another example is Naz Reid. I think in previous seasons, he would have received 30, 35, $40 million on the market. Instead, this summer, Ty Jerome, he receives $9 million. Naz Reid, he receives $25 million. And that feels a lot more connected to their actual worths. Okay, Naz Reid, he's around a $25 million player. Ty Jerome, he's around a $9 million player. But in past seasons, teams have overspent on players like that. Okay, where Ty Jerome would have made $15, $20 million for just being in the sixth man of the year race, where Naz Reid would have made upwards of $40 million just with the narrative of, oh, he would start on any team, but he's behind Gobert and Towns and Julius Randle. So it's very much the team's spending habits that we're seeing change. I will see this summer we've seen them change a little bit. We've seen them change, but a lot of the individual cases when you break things down team by team, a lot of teams shoot themselves in the foot, and then their fan base turns around and goes, "The new CBA destroyed another contending team." It's like, no, the CBA didn't destroy a contending team. Your front office destroyed that contending team via whether it's their spending habits or even their habits when it comes to trading off certain salaries and getting, I mean, those aren't necessarily habits, they're just moves in general, but more so talking about the contracts handed out. But we all know teams moves as well. I mean, teams make bad deals out there all the time. All the time. Which I'll mention this too for my Red Sox people out here. So a deal just broke. Before this live stream. The St. Louis Cardinals are trading Steven Matz to the Boston Red Sox in exchange for Blaze Jordan. I'm sorry, Red Sox fans. Just a little tidbit here, a little tidbit. I'm sorry, Red Sox fans. The Red Sox completely lost that trade. All right. How do you give up your number 17 prospect for Steven Matz? I mean, Steven Matz on the Cardinals, he's one of the most inconsistent pitchers who've been on the Cardinals in the last decade. I mean, he's a good starter, terrible starter, moving to the bullpen, not doing too well in the bullpen. Oh, all of a sudden he's a good bullpen arm. I'm sorry, Steven Matz, he's been all over the place in his career. I'm sorry, I'm talking about baseball right now, folks. I swear I'll make this quick, but this is just for my Red Sox fans out there. We get the Red Sox hat, get the Cardinal hat here, we get the Red Sox hat over here. The Red Sox completely lost that trade. Okay, Steven Matz for Blaze Jordan. Are you kidding me? Are you kidding me? But thank you to the Red Sox. Thank you for Blaze Jordan. I'm excited to watch Blaze Jordan. I gotta say, I was gonna take a little jab there at the Cardinals. I'm excited to watch the Cardinals completely botch the development of Blaze Jordan. Right, so that's what I'm excited about, really. However, another team potentially botching their future out there, not in the MLB but the NBA. It's the Portland Trailblazers. I want to talk about the Portland Trail Blazers, and I want to talk about the Blazers and the Warriors. I spent an hour on the Phoenix Suns. I was supposed to do only an hour for all three of these, right? The Suns, the Warriors, and the Blazers. But hey, we spent an hour on the Suns, and we talked about a million things with the Suns and even the NBA. So that's what happens here on CTW Live, right? That's what happens. We sometimes go off script. We sometimes go down rabbit holes. We sometimes cover things that need to be covered at the end of the day, okay? They need to be covered. Like that little CBA thing there at the end. But talking about the Portland Trailblazers, I'm not really sure what the Trailblazers are trying to do, but I halfway like it because their roster, there's some talent on their roster, okay? The Blazers roster owns some definitive talent going into next season. And not only do they own definitive talent, I think the Trailblazers own the potential to be one of the best defensive teams in the NBA next year. Truthfully, looking at their entire lineup, there's not too many large defensive holes outside of, ironically, the point guard position for the Portland Trailblazers. For the Portland Trailblazers, if you look at their lineup, look at some of their defensive staples, okay? The defensive staples for the Blazers. Drew Holiday, just acquired him from the Celtics. Jeremy Grant, Deni Avdija, Donovan Clingan, and I think he owns the potential to be an all defensive center one day. Then you have Jan Hansen off the bench, and you also have Robert Williams, who is an all defensive second team member back in 2022. Can he get to that level again? Robert Williams, we don't know. 26 games played in the last two seasons. But Chris Murray, a little less excited on the defensive end about him, but he is somebody with a little bit of size, and there is some potential there. Kamara could be an all defensive guy right away. Let's face it. He was on Ian's top 100 NBA player list. I was very surprised to see him on Ian's list, but Ian was very high on him. I'm very high on him as well. And I think the entire league, looking at what he's able to do, I think everybody's pretty high on Kamara, at least as a lockdown, hard-nosed defender, right? At the very least, that is what Kamara is. And so is Matisse Thybulle, who's right behind him in the rotation. Matisse Thybulle, another great defensive player, as we know. Shaedon Sharpe definitely owns some great defensive intangibles. Those are the great defensive players on the Blazers. And you have other players, Rupert, Reith, Wesley. Okay, yeah, they're at the back end. We'll see what they can do with the rotation. Not really counting on those guys. But all those other players that I just named, those are all great defensive players. I mean, some better than others, of course, but those are all pretty formidable defensive players. And then at the point guard spot, you have Scoot Henderson and Damian Lillard, which Damian Lillard, from what I could assume, right? I don't love to assume things, but Damian Lillard likely not playing next year, likely with the Achilles tear. So you just have Scoot Henderson at the point guard spot if you are the Blazers. That's going to be a spot. That's going to be a point of weakness for the Blazers. That's going to be a potential defensive liability for the Portland Trailblazers is Scoot Henderson down there on the roster, and even Damian Lillard when he comes back. But I like the defensive makeup of the Blazers. Okay, I really do. I think they could be really one of the best defensive teams in the NBA. They're not only with their starting lineup. I mean, two through five in their starting lineup, no holes. Right, point guard position, maybe a hole right there with Henderson or whoever plays in that spot more so than not. You could see a starting lineup of Holiday. You see Scoot Henderson come off the bench. You can see a starting lineup of Drew Holiday, Shaedon Sharpe, Jeremy Grant, Avdija, and Clingan. That's a no. We don't really know where to attack defensively. If you're a team out there facing the Blazers on any given night, that's a starting lineup where you don't have too many holes on the defensive end of the floor to attack. Looking at every single player going, he's got something to him, right? And even off the bench. I mean, Kamara, Thybulle, Thybulle and Robert Williams specifically, those three players own the greatest upside. Then Murray and Jan Hansen, both two. Those two players, there's some upside in them, less so than say Williams, Thybulle, and Kamara. But even off the bench, I mean, you have supplemental pieces if you're the Blazers to add to that defensive resume on the court, to add to that defensive repertoire on the court. So I like the Blazers from the standpoint of leaning heavily into defense, right? And even that's what's to be said about that Drew Holiday deal. I think everybody looked at the Drew Holiday deal and went, what exactly are the Blazers doing? They're adding an older player. They're adding a player who's is going to be 35 years old, right? And Drew Holiday. And they're adding him to a younger squad who's on the come up, right? The Blazers were one of the more, I mean, last year the Blazers didn't tank. They I gotta say, I respect the Blazers last year for not outright tanking. I mean, they were still down in the standings. I believe they were the 12 seed last year, I want to say, somewhere around that mark. I mean, they were below the play-in. But the Blazers, they were a team that entered last season as a lot of people had them as 14th, 15th in the West, I mean 29th, 30th in the NBA, right? The Blazers didn't outright tank, still got what they still at the end of the season, right? Still at the end of the season, wound up with a record that was what they were 11th in the draft. They were 11th in the draft, right? They were 11th. Then they traded that pick to the Grizzlies. And the Blazers, I gotta say, they had a pretty okay offseason. I mean, they trade Simons for Drew Holiday. And again, Holiday, that's the whole point here. Holiday, a little older of a player, but you're trading offense, 26-year-old Simons, his robust offensive game for a more seasoned defensive game in Drew Holiday. Now I do worry about the Blazers when it comes to that. You're trading a still up and coming player in Simons for a regressing player in Holiday. That's certainly concerning for the Blazers, but when it comes to the trade off of offense and defense, the Blazers certainly got better defensively by trading for Drew Holiday and getting rid of Anthony Simons. Now, did they get better offensively? Probably not, but they have other offensive pieces that could potentially make up for that a little bit. And we'll get to that in a second. But the Holiday deal, right? The Holiday deal, it establishes that defensive culture, some leadership in the locker room for the Blazers, of course. And then you go down the list. There was a deal. Let's see. The Blazers, what deal was that? I was just thinking about that deal. Oh, yes. The deal the Blazers made on draft night for Jan Hansen. Young Hansen or Hansen Yang or whatever. I don't know. We got all the new players in the NBA. We got to get their pronunciations down pat. We'll get them down pat. I hear Young Hansen, Hansen Yang. I'm hearing a little bit of both. Gotta hear more from him himself. Of course, didn't speak English, however, so it's kind of hard to do that. But um, Jan Hansen. I'm gonna go Jan Hansen. That's what Adam Silver went with on draft night. All right, Jan Hansen. And we gotta figure this out because I think he's gonna be a really good player. Bottom line here. But even in that deal on draft night, the Blazers traded the number 11 pick, which became Cedric Coward. I like him as a prospect too. Don't get me wrong, but the Blazers trade away the 11th pick for the 16th pick, where they land Jan Hansen, who in the summer league showed, woo, I mean, he could really be a player in the future for the Blazers. And they also picked up a future first round pick from the Grizzlies, in which belonged to the Orlando Magic, that was sent to the Grizzlies in the Desmond Bain deal. So the Grizzlies took one of those Desmond Bain picks they received from the Magic and flipped them over to the Blazers. I'm not quite certain which year that was, but it's a future first round pick regardless. The Blazers received. So the Blazers trade away number 11 for Jan Hansen and a future first. That feels like a win for the Blazers because you could easily say Hansen could be way better than Cedric Coward, and you got a future first if you're the Blazers. The Blazers already early returns look like they won that deal. Um, Obviously, Cedric Coward could be something for the Grizzlies in the future, but it's looking like the Blazers definitely did something with that deal. They got the player they wanted and a future first round pick. And on top of that, the Blazers, they a week prior, or not a week prior, it was rather days prior, right? Revisionist history, they traded for Drew Holiday. And I like the Holiday edition. I would be a little wary if I'm a Blazers fan, but I'm also, if I were a Blazers fan, I'd be leaning into defense for offense, Holiday culture builder. Holiday is going to be a player that ultimately brings along some of the young guys on the Blazers roster. I like that aspect of that deal for the Blazers. Holiday's future money and the regression from Holiday, that's another thing, right? That's those are the bullet points where Blazers fans can become wary. But ultimately, that Holiday deal and even that deal for Jan Hansen set the Blazers up to be one of the friskier, especially defensive teams in the Western Conference, if not the entire NBA, especially when it comes to, again, the defensive end of the floor. What's funny about the Blazers, though, I will say this about the Blazers. Defensively, I think they're going to be a great team. Offensively, they might be one of the worst teams in the NBA. I'm not seeing a ton of scores for the Blazers here. You have Scoot. You hope for the Blazers, Scoot Henderson becomes that guy, right? Scoot Henderson in year 3 really becomes that guy. And what's another just insane? I will say there are a lot of moments in NBA history, especially when looking back at the draft, where we go, "Wow, we were really looking at this comparison or this like the say Jason Tatum and Kyle Kuzma from 2017. I mean, that was a comparison in 2017. Nowadays, it's no, that is not even. I mean, if you were to ever bring that conversation up, it's in the line of presenting that meme or presenting that joke or bringing it up as a joke, right? That's the same thing with Scoot Henderson and Victor Wembanyama. Victor Wembanyama. I mean, you would never take Scoot Henderson over Victor Wembanyama on at even if Victor Wembanyama. If you were to say, "Oh, Wemby, I tore his Achilles, wouldn't play next season," you'd still take the future of what Wemby could be over Scoot Henderson. That being said, Scoot Henderson. Not trying to thrash on him too hard here, but he in year 3, you're hoping the Blazers start to see that emergence from Scoot Henderson. He could be the guy that fills the stat sheet when it comes to points for the Blazers a little bit more than what's needed ultimately, or rather, he fills the stat sheet. Scoot Henderson owns the ability to fill the sheet up to a point where the Blazers need it to be. Outside of Henderson, though, and again, Henderson highly theoretical as that 1A top scoring guard on the Blazers, right? Very theoretical. Outside of Henderson, Holiday, not a big offensive contributor. I mean, he's more of a complementary piece at this point in his career. He's I've never looked at Holiday and thought he was a how you say I think he's a tremendous offensive player because he's always in the right spots, he's always willing to play his role, he understands positioning on the offensive end of the floor. And we've done so many film breakdowns on Drew Holiday and well, just the Celtics in general. And what's so evident is Drew Holiday, he understands spacing on the floor, right? He understands, oh, this cut right here and this time cut right here is going to bring this defender down here and it's going to open up this shot. So Drew Holiday is a very how you say within the margins type of an offensive player, right? He wins within all the little margins that people don't see. Everybody sees the handles and the bucket right at the end and the pass and whatever, but they don't see the little movement off ball that really matters for a team on the offensive end of the floor. And that's where Drew Holiday can provide a team offensively. But I don't see Drew Holiday as this big time scorer, this big time ball handler. I just don't see him as that kind of offensive player whatsoever. And I don't like the narrative that Celtics Nation has came up with in the last 2 years where they're going, well, Drew Holiday is the fifth option. He could be scoring a lot more than he does with the Celtics. Yes, that's fairly true. Drew Holiday could have scored a couple more points if he wasn't with as many offensive options as the Celtics own the last 2 seasons. But at the same time, Drew Holiday is not this crazy scoring presence like people kind of made him out to be. I mean, people were fueling the narrative of, "Ooh, Drew Holiday, he's a real scorer if he wasn't with the Celtics." That's not the case. He's still a very effective complementary player with any team. Yes, if he was given a little more responsibility with the ball, he could come up with a couple more points, but he's not a big time scorer, not a big time ball handler, not a big time off the dribble shooter. Drew Holiday is. That narrative has been a little overstretched by Celtic Nation in the last 2 seasons. Drew Holiday is an in the margins type of offensive player. And that's what we're talking about here with the Blazers is Drew Holiday, yes, he can supplement their offense, but in that way, in that marginal way, in between, utilizing the spacing, the positioning on the floor, and being in the right space at the right time, right? But Drew Holiday is not going to be a guy who's just scoring outright for the Blazers. Not going to be the guy who's just taking responsibility and scoring for the Blazers. Nor is Jeremy Grant. I think he'll take more responsibility in scoring than Drew Holiday, but Jeremy Grant is not the most efficient isolation scorer. We know this. I mean, he's a player over time too. Almost with this, he's not in the conversation with Booker, Williamson, Trae Young, or Brandon Ingram when it comes to stars, but another player that's been a little bit overpaid for what his actual value is on court. Jeremy Grant is definitely more of a role player, but they almost pay him as a guy who's a little bit more than a role player and even somebody who could handle the ball a little bit more than he probably should be handling the ball. And of course, trying to score the ball. We know he has some skill. We know Jeremy Grant has some skill, but can he be that 1A guy? No. Okay, bottom line. Abdia, he's almost in the same boat. I would say him and Grant are in that same boat of yes, there's some creation. Yes, there's some shooting. Yes, they can score a little bit off the dribble, but are they going to be 1A guys? Absolutely not for the Blazers. And that's the problem. And then you go to the center spot. I mean, Klingon, all the centers. I mean, the centers are not going to be here. They're not. There are no Joel Embiids on this roster. There are no Nikola Jokic's on this roster. There are no DeMarcus Cousins or Anthony Davises on this roster for the Blazers here. So you have no scoring options there when it comes to creating on their own. Off the bench, Sharp a little bit, but then you're saying, okay, he's more in the conversation with Henderson. You hope some emergence is there. But even with him, I would think there would have been a little bit more emergence in his ability to score at this point in his career. I'm still slotting in Shaden Sharp as more of a, I would say I'm going to compare him to Dante DiVincenzo, right? More of that level of player, the Nikhil Alexander Walker level of player where, yes, very good bench piece, could even start for you, but is he going to be that top flight scorer, that top flight creator? No. He's going to be a good role player, right? That's where I see Shaden Sharp. Kamara, he's almost in the same boat as Grant and Abdia, but way less offensively skilled, more of a defensive oriented player. Chris Murray, he's more offensive oriented, I will say. But he's not a creator. Thibault, a mess on offense, as we know. And the one guy who could make a difference in all this is, of course, Damian Lillard, which ironically, looking at the Blazers roster, the entire time the Blazers rostered Lillard and McCollum, right? That was the big duo for the Blazers for years, right? CJ McCollum and Damian Lillard. It was always about how can the Blazers maximize one of the best backcourts in the league. And it truly was. I mean, scoring wise, CJ McCollum and Damian Lillard were damn near unstoppable as a backcourt for years. And the problems with the Blazers when it came to contention, right? It was always about the players around McCollum and Lillard. It was always about who's playing center for the Blazers, who's playing the forward slots for the Blazers, who's coming off the bench. And all the names were not the best names in the world, and the Blazers most of the time were just scraping for any name they could actually find out there on the market. And you'd find random, and again, the Blazers, they really haven't ended this trend, because I think you could say this with this team as well. Just kind of came up with a random assortment of players, almost like where the Blazers are now. Where last year, I would say the Blazers, I looked at their roster last year, I went, this is a random assortment of players, but I kind of like some of them here, like some young guys, kind of like some of them. Same thing with this roster, random assortment of players, but kind of like some of them. Kind of like, it makes a little bit more sense than last year, I will say. But the Blazers with McCollum and Lillard, the ironic thing about the Blazers right now is with McCollum and Lillard, the Blazers could never find the right pieces to fit around CJ McCollum and Damian Lillard to maximize their star potentials. And yet now, so basically, the Blazers, they had the star players, didn't have the role players, right? Now, the Blazers have all the role players and no star players. That's where the Blazers are. I mean, it's a complete flip of a script for the Portland Trailblazers. They have all the role players now, especially on the defensive end of the floor. They have all of the guys who can go out there and defend. But offensively, there's no superstar with the Blazers. There's nobody who can get buckets consistently. And that's where Damian Lillard ultimately could change this entire situation with the Blazers next season. Now, am I going to bet on that? Absolutely not, because Damian Lillard will be coming off a torn Achilles at the age of 36, and I mean, this roster will look a little bit different once he comes back as well. I'm not betting on it, but he is the one player who can make a difference within this roster, where you look at the rest of the roster and go, there are no scorers, no creators, no real playmakers. You're hoping Henderson, maybe even Shaden Sharp, develop into more of those players. But that's where Lillard can make the difference, is if Lillard comes back after next season, or even at the end of next season, we don't know. If Lillard comes back into the lineup and actually looks like Damian Lillard again, which again, I wouldn't bet on necessarily, but I really hope it happens. If Lillard can come back healthy, I mean, he can be that player that kind of is the final stone in the I've never seen the movie. I don't know what it's called. It's in the Thanos glove, folks. In the Thanos glove, right? He's the final stone. It could be the final stone in the Thanos glove. Why do I feel like what the Infinity Stone, the Infinity Glove? I don't know. I gotta watch the movie. All right. I've only seen the memes, folks. I've only seen the memes of that movie. Regardless, Lillard, that's the comparison though. I mean, the Blazers, I mean, they could have all the Infinity Stones, that whole glove. That whole glove is covered. Then that final piece could be Damian Lillard if he comes back and actually looks like Damian Lillard. I mean, that's the bottom line with Damian Lillard and the Blazers, and why the Blazers shelled out 3 years, $42 million to Damian Lillard, which that's $14 million per year. I got to say, I apologize, folks. I was very adamant about no team signing Damian Lillard next season, and Damian Lillard likely coming back on a minimum 2 years from now, or rather in the summer of 2026, so a year from now. But the Blazers went ahead and gave Damian Lillard 3 years, $42 million, which is $14 million per year, and the Blazers will be paying Damian Lillard next season $14 million to maybe not play for them. All right, so Damian Lillard will likely not be playing for the will likely not be playing for the Blazers next year, but he'll be on the roster, and the Blazers will roster him years after, at least the 2 seasons after, at $14 million per year. But I do want to get into this detail though. When it comes to Damian Lillard's money, Damian Lillard is, some NBA players, they just get lucky. All right, they just get lucky, and that's just how the world works. Some people get lucky, some people are unlucky. All right, that's just how the world works sometimes. Damian Lillard next season will not be playing basketball, likely. Excuse me, folks. Will likely not be playing basketball next season. Despite that, Damian Lillard will be making $68 million next year. Okay, so Damian Lillard will likely not suit up in 25-26 in that season. Damian Lillard will likely not play basketball in the 25-26 season, yet will still be making $68 million next year, and that is from his Bucks contract and his Blazers contract. And we went over this earlier with Bradley Beal. We went over it in the past with Damian Lillard. Lillard will still make the money he's owed next year. On the Bucks books, it'll be $22.5 million, but Lillard will get the full 50 in the next 2 years, and the Bucks will be stretching that out on their books. It's for accounting purposes, right? The stretching is for accounting purposes on the Bucks books. As for realistic, real life checks, right? Damian Lillard will receive that $50 million next season. On top of that $14 million, right? And Damian Lillard, he was making about $54 million. So Damian Lillard will make $68 million next season to essentially not play basketball. And then the year after that, right, when Damian Lillard comes back, Damian Lillard will be making $72 million. $72 million, folks. $72 million. So that's his Bucks contract. The second year, the Bucks, again, they waived and stretched. It's that second year of the Bucks deal with the $14 million added on from the Blazers. And then in year 3, Damian Lillard makes $14 million with the Blazers. His Bucks deal is gone. But my goodness, $68 million, $72 million, $14 million for Damian Lillard in the next 3 seasons. And 68 and 72 for Damian Lillard. I mean, that is a pretty good payday for, let's face it, Damian Lillard. He's not going to play basketball next season, and the year after, he might not be, I mean, he might be at John Wall levels when he comes back, right? John Wall tore his Achilles, came back, wasn't exactly the same player. That could be Damian Lillard as well. And ultimately, Damian Lillard benefits. What's a little morbid about this situation, Damian Lillard arguably benefited from tearing his Achilles, financially speaking. Because if Damian Lillard doesn't tear his Achilles, the Bucks might just keep Damian Lillard around, and it might be Lillard and Giannis for another season. Instead, Lillard tears his Achilles. The Bucks waive Lillard's deal, Lillard still gets all of his money. It wasn't a buyout. It was a straight up waive. Like, goodbye, Damian Lillard. We're not going to pay you, or rather, we're going to pay you to not play for us, right? We're looking at it from the Bucks perspective. But the Bucks, they get rid of Damian Lillard because he tears his Achilles. They waive him. So Lillard still gets that money. And on top of that, Lillard's now a free agent. Oh, I can go sign wherever I want. And lands back with his former team, the Portland Trailblazers, and signs a 3-year, $42 million deal worth $14 million per year. So arguably, that Achilles tear for Damian Lillard was worth $42 million for him over the next 3 seasons, and added to the astronomical salary total he already owned for the next 2 years. I mean, just in real life. I mean, just forget the salary books. Damian Lillard will be making $68 million next year and $72 million the year after. I mean, now those are, I mean, it's a morbid question, or not. I don't want to say morbid. No, I'm going to ask this question, right? It's a morbid situation, but it's also a morbid question here. Would you sustain? Well, no, this is no. I shouldn't even ask this. Would you sustain Achilles tear for an extra $42 million? I don't know. I don't know. That's kind of an interesting question. It's kind of an interesting morbid question there. I hate to chuckle about it because let's face it, Damian Lillard. I want to see him healthy, but didn't make $42 million off of potentially just tearing his Achilles, which is not something you see out of the NBA too often. Another thing you don't see out of the NBA too often is the situation going on down in San Francisco with the Golden State Warriors. Right now, the Golden State Warriors, there are only 10 players on the Golden State Warriors roster. The Warriors have done nothing this offseason, as a lot of people know out there. And all of a sudden, the Warriors are in a contract dispute with Jonathan Kuminga. Jonathan Kuminga, can I just give my little personal bit on Jonathan Kuminga? Not a special player, all right? He's just not a special player. I think he's in the line of player where $1 million athlete, maybe a 10-cent brain, just saying. I hate to label players in that way, but Jonathan Kuminga kind of strikes me as one of those players because you can see the talent within Jonathan Kuminga's game. Still very young player, all right? Still a lot of room to develop, but you can see the talent in his game. That being said, I'm just not so certain that IQ is there at all. And I'm that's also, if I'm looking at the Warriors situation last year, a lot of people at the end of the year. Now, I didn't agree with Steve Kerr taking Kuminga out of the lineup at the end of the year because the Warriors didn't have the room to take Kuminga out of the lineup. Okay, the Warriors were already working with a slim lineup when it came to options, right? The options were slim for the Warriors. It's not like the Warriors had a robust collection of options to roll out like the Pacers or the Thunder, right? The Warriors were very much working with a tight-knit group going into the playoffs last year because of the Jimmy Butler deal and because of where they've put themselves in recent seasons. But the Warriors ultimately last year didn't really own the luxury to just take out a versatile forward in Jonathan Kuminga, take him out of the lineup. I didn't agree with that. Okay, the Warriors, they did not own the luxury to take Jonathan Kuminga out of the rotation when there was nobody out there to actually replace Jonathan Kuminga. And Kuminga, at the end of the day, he is a versatile forward. Okay, he can defend. He can defend well. He can defend. Hold up. Okay, so Jonathan Kuminga ultimately, defensively, is going to provide something for the Warriors, and offensively, there's something there to his game. But here's what I'm going to point out. All right, here's what I'm going to point out. The Warriors, when Steve Kerr took Jonathan Kuminga out of the lineup, all right, I didn't agree with it because of what I just said, right? The Jonathan Kuminga can still defend, can still give you something offensively, and the Warriors didn't own the luxury to just take Jonathan Kuminga out of the lineup when the options were slim, when there were no replacements for Jonathan Kuminga. I didn't agree with the Warriors taking Jonathan Kuminga out of the lineup. That being said, I understand why Steve Kerr went that direction. Jonathan Kuminga, for as versatile as he is, for as talented as he is, I believe the decision-making just isn't all the way there. Okay? On the offensive end of the floor. We just talked about Drew Holiday and how how great he is at complementing other players on the offensive end of the floor, just simply off of the know-how of where he's supposed to be positioned, when he's supposed to be cutting, and how he's supposed to be operating on the offensive end of the floor when it comes to attacking with the ball and even attacking without the ball on the offensive end of the floor. Drew Holiday has all of those little intangibles. Jonathan Kuminga, when I watch him play, specifically on the offensive end of the floor, he feels as if he is the 1A superstar next to Steph Curry. I mean, he believes, Jonathan Kuminga believes he is the next Kevin Durant next to Steph Curry. Now, I couldn't say that, I'm not saying that's exactly what he said, but you can watch him on court and go, oh, yeah, there might be a little bit of a I'm the guy in Jonathan Kuminga, right? A little bit of that, it's me. It's me. Give me the ball. I'm trying to score, right? And I can see that within the Warriors offense becoming a definite point of annoyance for a coach like Steve Kerr, where you're trying to run an efficient offensive system with a lot of cutting, a lot of ball movement, just a lot of, and if you look at the Warriors offense going all like the entire Steve Kerr tenure, right? It's a very complex offense to learn for any player. All right. Players play free, don't get me wrong, but it's a very complex offense to learn. There's a lot of cutting and a lot of ball movement, as I said, but a lot of that comes off the ball, right? So you have the main ball handler at the top of the key, which is most often Steph Curry, but it doesn't even need to be Steph Curry. We see Draymond Green, it's the other ball handlers up there, and great passers, great playmakers for the Warriors, set up the Warriors offense. But ultimately, you have at the top of the key the Warriors ball handler or even playmaker, doesn't have to be a definitive ball handler like we just mentioned with Draymond Green. All that action is happening off the ball, whether it's down inside the paint, whether it's on the wing, all of the action is happening off ball. And how the Warriors offense runs, it's a collective unit of movement. All right. It's about shifting the defense to one side of the floor and attacking the other. Jonathan Kuminga, I just don't know if the full awareness for that is completely there. I don't know if he fits into an offense that is ran from a complex standpoint of movement and cutting, right? A lot of cutting and movement, cutting and movement, cutting and movement. I don't know if Jonathan Kuminga fits well into an offense like that because of how he's wired. I mean, a player the Warriors want on their offense is a player who's unselfish and a player who understands when it's time to attack. Okay, Jonathan Kuminga, he owns the mentality of I'm attacking all the time. Okay, when he gets the ball stops and he's attacking. Okay, he's not a very unselfish player. He's more of, if you want to really term it, he's more of a selfish player more than anything else. I hate to say it, but that's the reality of the situation. That's the realities of the situation for Kuminga and the Warriors. And I can understand why Steve Kerr was disgruntled with Jonathan Kuminga. Okay, I can understand. Like, I can see it in the film. All right, I can see it in the film. I don't need speculation. It's there in the film. I can see the definitive points of right here, this possession right here. Jonathan Kuminga, what is he doing? Why is he gets the ball? He gets the ball almost in the low post, but he doesn't have positioning, and now he's taking a weird turnaround jumper, completely off balance. Like, I've seen the possessions. I can understand why the Warriors and Steve Kerr, I can understand why, number one, they sat Jonathan Kuminga in the first place, but also number two now, why they're not willing to pay Jonathan Kuminga more than the offer in which they just gave out to Jonathan Kuminga. Again, I don't agree with the fact they took out Jonathan Kuminga from the rotation because I think the Warriors were at a point of desperation. And when you're at a point of desperation, beggars cannot be choosers. We all know this, but I can see why it happened, right? I can see, that's the reason why. And it's also the reason why the Warriors do not want to pay Jonathan Kuminga more money than the money they're offering him right now, which the Warriors just offered Jonathan Kuminga a 2-year, $42 million deal. Sorry, misspoke there. 2 years, $45 million deal. Sorry, folks. So the Warriors just offered Jonathan Kuminga a 2-year, $45 million deal with a team option in year 2. So basically a 1-year, $22.5 million deal, and the Warriors control what happens in year 2. Meanwhile, the Suns and the Kings are reportedly willing to offer Jonathan Kuminga upwards of 4 years, $90 million, fully guaranteed with a player option in year 4. Which, if you're just looking at those two deals, the Kings and the Suns offers are a lot better for Jonathan Kuminga than the Warriors. Okay, but the Warriors, they control the situation. The reason why? The Suns and the Kings, they need to offload some salary in order to fit Jonathan Kuminga into their books and actually make that deal work. Therefore, the Warriors could simply say, you know what? We don't want to partake in a sign and trade with you, Sacramento, or we don't want to partake in a sign and trade with you, Phoenix. Good luck. Good luck elsewhere. You're not getting Jonathan Kuminga. And then all of a sudden, the Warriors can then turn around to Jonathan Kuminga, which they're doing right now. They offered him 2 years, $45 million, $22.5 million per year. So Jonathan Kuminga, same rate, $22.5 million, either for the Warriors or the Suns and the Kings. But the Suns and the Kings, they're offering Jonathan Kuminga 4 years, $90 million, $22.5 million per year for 4 years, with a player option that Jonathan Kuminga controls on the last end of the deal, or rather the last year of the deal. Meanwhile, the Warriors are offering 2 years, $45 million to Jonathan Kuminga. That's a deal split in half, and the second year is non-guaranteed because it's a team option for the Warriors. So basically 1 year, $22.5 million, or 4 years of $22.5 million each of the 4 years, right? But the Warriors right now can say, well, Suns and Kings, we're not participating in a sign and trade with you guys. We're not doing any of that. Therefore, Kuminga, you could either sign the 2 years, $45 million, or you can sign the 1 year, $7.9 million qualifying offer. Okay? So right now, I'm not certain how this is going to play out. Okay? I'm not fully certain. And we did have a rumor come out actually earlier in the broadcast. We had a rumor come out earlier in the broadcast. The Warriors are looking for unprotected first-round picks plus a good player for Jonathan Kuminga. So they're looking for, I don't know if it's picks or a singular pick here. So for an unprotected first-round pick, so at least one, maybe multiple, who knows, and a good player for Jonathan Kuminga. So that's what the Warriors' asking price is for Jonathan Kuminga. The Suns and the Kings are those two teams who are actually trying to trade for Jonathan Kuminga. They're trying to sign Jonathan Kuminga, but at the same time, they would have to ultimately trade something for Jonathan Kuminga. And if you are the Sacramento Kings, right, some of those trade candidates next season, could it be a guy like DeMar DeRozan making $24.5 million? Could it be Malik Monk making $18.8 million? After that, you're looking at a bunch of players with salaries that aren't making a big dent. Likely not looking at any of those, but sign and trade wise, the two players the Warriors would likely receive in a sign and trade with the Kings, if the Kings were to sign Jonathan Kuminga, or rather, the Warriors would sign Jonathan Kuminga, then trade him to the Kings. That's how a sign and trade works. But if the Kings were to acquire Jonathan Kuminga, the two players you're looking at with the Kings right now to potentially be a Golden State Warrior within that deal, well, let's phrase this a little bit differently. So if the Kings acquire Jonathan Kuminga, one of these two players will be on the move, either DeMar DeRozan or Malik Monk. They'll be on the move to the Warriors or a third party. Who knows? Most likely the Warriors, considering the Warriors have done nothing this offseason and they only roster 10 players at this moment in time. But Malik Monk and DeMar DeRozan will be the prime candidates within a Jonathan Kuminga sign and trade. As for the Phoenix Suns, let's go over to Phoenix's roster because we just talked about them for about an hour, but we're going to talk about them here again. In a Jonathan Kuminga sign and trade, you're likely looking at maybe Dillon Brooks, maybe Grayson Allen, Royce O'Neal. Those are the three players that would likely be sent to the Warriors. One of those three players, if not two of those three players, sent to the Golden State Warriors for Jonathan Kuminga. So with the Kings, you're looking at DeMar DeRozan and Malik Monk. With the Suns, you're looking at Royce O'Neal, Grayson Allen, or Dillon Brooks. right? So those are all the players involved here. Dillon Brooks, Grayson Allen, Royce O'Neal, Malik Monk, and DeMar DeRozan. Are the Kings and the Suns willing to give up one, if not multiple of those players for Jonathan Kuminga? Personally, I wouldn't. I really wouldn't. I really wouldn't. And a first round pick. Let's face it, the Warriors want a first round pick as well. And a first round pick. And the Warriors have leverage here. The Warriors have leverage because the Warriors, these teams want Jonathan Kuminga, and they're willing to give him $90 million for the next 4 years, which I think is absolutely ludicrous given the player he actually is. I don't think Jonathan Kuminga is worth as much as Herb Jones. I would take Herb Jones over Jonathan Kuminga every day of the week. Okay, I'm sorry. Jonathan Kuminga, I understand the talent and what he could be. Again, $1 million athlete with a 10-cent brain. I would rather have Herb Jones, who may be less offensively capable, but still an all defensive guy and somebody who understands his role on the team, unlike Jonathan Kuminga. Okay, just saying, just compare, because those are the two those are two players that can be compared because their salary levels. I mean, they're both making around $22.5 million, or will be, maybe, maybe. Who knows? Jonathan Kuminga, you could really fumble the bag here. But the Warriors definitely own leverage within the situation because the Kings and the Suns want to give him that $90 million. And they ultimately have to make a deal work, whether it's Dillon Brooks, Grayson Allen, Royce O'Neal, DeMar DeRozan, or Malik Monk. The Suns and the Kings, they have to make a deal work with one of those 5 players, if not multiple of those 5 players. And the Warriors can sit back and say, well, we're not going to do it. We're not going to do it. I mean, we're not going to do it. You can't. The Suns and the Kings are not going to be able to sign Jonathan Kuminga without the Warriors' help. And the Warriors can essentially sit back and go, we're not doing anything. And here's the money, Jonathan Kuminga. Here's $22.5 million for 1 year. And yes, it's a 2-year deal with a team option in year 2. So essentially a 1-year deal. Here's a 1-year deal. You could either sign that 1-year deal. The Warriors, it almost feels like right now, the Warriors are almost in a position where they're going, we're either getting something really good out of the Kings and Suns right now, like a nice role player and a first-round pick, or we're giving Jonathan Kuminga the option to sign a 1-year, $22.5 million deal or a 1-year, $7.9 million deal. The Warriors, what they want is probably Jonathan Kuminga on that 2-year, $45 million deal. Again, that's the 1-year, $22.5 million with the team option in year 2. I'm going to call it the 1-year, $22.5 million because that's basically what it is. But that's what the Warriors want, right? I should say, well, the Warriors, it'd be nice for their salary books to see him on a $7.9 million deal. But the Warriors, if you're looking at the corner they're trying to back Kuminga into, they're basically backing him into a corner of picking a 1-year, $7.9 million deal or picking a 1-year, $22.5 million deal. The choice is pretty clear for Jonathan Kuminga, right? Where you're going, oh, they're not trading me to the Suns or the Kings. They're not letting that happen. Am I going to take the 22.5 or the 7.9? I would go with the 22.5 if I were Jonathan Kuminga. I'm just saying. That's what it looks like. I'm very fascinated to see how this situation plays out because everybody's been talking about it for the past month. It's been one of the more talked about situations in the NBA because, let's face it, we've had a million hours to talk about a million transactions in the NBA, and the Warriors are a team that's done nothing so far, and this is their top free agent in Jonathan Kuminga. And the situation has just not been resolved in any manner whatsoever. And it seems like there is a clear impasse. And let's give out this detail. Jonathan Kuminga is declining the Warriors' offer, which I don't know if that necessarily means that offer is off the table. But for now, Kuminga's going, I want that 4 years, $90 million, which I understand. When that deal is out there, if you're Kuminga's agent, you're doing everything in your power to get Kuminga to the Suns or Kings and get him that 4-year, $90 million deal. That's why this isn't over yet, okay? Because if you're Kuminga and if you're Kuminga's agent, they're doing everything in their power to get Kuminga that 4-year, $90 million deal. They're doing absolutely everything to secure that 4-year, $90 million deal because, number one, the agent is going to be paid extra from the extra years on that deal. And so is Jonathan Kuminga. I mean, they're going to make 40, I mean, that's an extra $45 million for Jonathan Kuminga. And that's not only an extra $45 million. You're really looking at an extra what? Quick math here. So let's see. You're looking at an extra, let's just get the number right here, folks, instead of so you're looking at an extra, let's see, $67.5 million. That's why this situation isn't resolved, because Kuminga and his agent definitely want that extra $67.5 million. All right, $67.5 million, because the Warriors contract is only guaranteed up to one season. Meanwhile, all of these other deals, whether it's the Suns and the Kings for Jonathan Kuminga, they're guaranteed up to 4 years. They have those deals. There will be a player option for Kuminga in which he controls in year 4. That team option, Kuminga doesn't control in year 2 with the Warriors. So right now, Kuminga and his agent, they want that extra $67.5 million guaranteed for 3 years. And not only that, the Warriors, we've already talked about it, there's been a lot of back and forth between the Warriors, the Warriors coaching staff, Steve Kerr and Jonathan Kuminga, about his actual place within the rotation and on the roster. With the Suns and Kings, Jonathan Kuminga is going to come in to either one of those situations and likely start right away, and likely, I mean, once you pay a player that amount of money and you try to extract him from the Warriors and do that via sign and trade, Kuminga's going to own a definitive role on the Suns and Kings that he probably won't own on the Warriors next to Draymond Green, Steph Curry, and Jimmy Butler, right? Specifically, a guy like Jimmy Butler. I mean, Jimmy Butler's just going to be playing over Jonathan Kuminga at his position on the Suns and Kings. That's not going to happen. So it's very much the opportunity, the spot in the rotation for Jonathan Kuminga, but it's also about that guaranteed money. I mean, we're very much at an impasse here between the Warriors and Kuminga. And the Warriors, they want to corner Kuminga into choosing between the 22.5 and the 7.9, which is it's a very easy decision for Kuminga, but Kuminga wants the Warriors to ultimately sign him and trade him to either the Suns and the Kings so he can actually make that full 4 years, $90 million. Because otherwise, now what I was confused about here with this situation, at first I went, why couldn't the Suns and Kings why couldn't Kuminga go get offers from those teams and the Warriors have to match and the Warriors can't match and then Kuminga walks? We've seen that before, right? And we've seen teams match before. But it's either, we've seen in the past, DeAndre Ayton, Otto Porter, right? And these situations, I will say, don't happen every year. That's why this is pretty rare. I mean, this doesn't necessarily happen every single season. And it's always with these type of players where it's a boom or bust type of a player where you go, this deal could look awful or amazing in time, right? Otto Porter and DeAndre Ayton, those deals unfortunately looked awful in time, but the examples with those players, DeAndre Ayton, the Suns don't want to pay DeAndre Ayton. The Wizards didn't want to pay Otto Porter. Both of those players went out and received offers from Otto Porter from the Nets and then DeAndre Ayton from the Pacers. And the Suns and the Wizards, they had a certain amount of time. They had a implemented period of time where they could either match those deals or not. And if they didn't, Ayton would have walked to the Pacers and Otto Porter would have walked to the Brooklyn Nets, which we all know the Suns matched Ayton's number. The Wizards matched Otto Porter's number. And those contracts turned out to be awful, but those deals were matched. I did question why couldn't Kuminga just go to the Suns or the Kings and do that, but the Pacers and the Nets, they own the necessary salary space in order to sign Porter and Ayton at the time, whereas the Suns and Kings, they do not own the necessary salary space to sign Jonathan Kuminga, which means the Warriors must be involved from a sign and trade perspective, which the Warriors, as I mentioned, they own all the leverage in because they could sit back and go, we're not doing anything. Kuminga pick between 22.5 and 7.9, right? And then Kuminga's on the other side going, I'm not doing that. Can the Suns, the Kings, can you guys come to a deal with the Warriors, picks, players, whoever it is, so I can make that 4 years, 90 million? I mean, that's where we're at right now within this situation. It's a very interesting situation from the standpoint of the logistics at hand. we haven't seen play out in this manner, I don't think, ever, because we've seen other restricted free agents in the past. And we'll talk about Josh Giddey on another live. We're not going to talk about him tonight, but we've seen other restricted free agents in the past. They've been around, and they've been around in the same cycle of what I just gave out, where it's, oh, their team doesn't want to pay them. Now they're going to go mine other offers. Now their team's either forced to match or not. And that creates a bunch of bad blood between the team and the player too. Let's mention that, as the situation is with the Warriors and Kuminga. I don't think the Warriors and Kuminga has to understand this is a business, right? Because Kuminga, I mean, the Warriors and Kuminga have not been exactly on the same page during his time with the Warriors, and now they're not on the same page when it comes to his contract either, which is not totally surprising. But ultimately, we've seen that whole cycle play out with restricted free agents in the past. This one's a little different. This one's the Warriors are cornering Jonathan Kuminga. He's trying to get something else, but he can't unless his team actually does something about it, which is commit to a sign and trade with the Suns or Kings. And the Warriors can simply say, we're not doing that. The Warriors can either sit there and do nothing, which I'm sure they're fine with. Maybe. Who knows? The Warriors haven't done anything this offseason. Maybe there's a little more desperation in the Warriors than we think. But the Warriors can sit back and do nothing. Or they can mine as many picks and players as they possibly can out of the Suns and Kings, depending on what the Suns and Kings believe Jonathan Kuminga is actually worth. So the Warriors are in a huge spot of leverage right now, and that is not something we typically see with teams and restricted free agents. Usually the restricted free agents, there's a little bit of a path to finagling their best deal, or rather extracting their best deal. Jonathan Kuminga, that path is very narrow, very slim and narrow, and it also entails the Warriors needing to get involved from a sign and trade perspective, which I'm not convinced is going. I'm really not convinced of any path playing out right now. I could see the qualifying offer for Kuminga. I think that would be absolutely idiotic, because why wouldn't you just take the 2-year, $22.5 million deal and just say, look, understand, not getting the 4 years, $90 million, but I'm also not going to relegate myself to $7.9 million if you're Kuminga. Could either be the $7.9 million qualifying offer for Kuminga, could be the $22.5 million deal, or rather the 2-year, $45 million deal from the Warriors he takes with that team option in the second year, which he's declining right now, or it could be that 4-year, $90 million deal in which Kuminga receives from a team out there, whether it's the Suns or the Kings. Those are the two teams right now. And a sign and trade could happen between the Warriors and either the Suns or the Kings. I would not be shocked to see any of those paths play out. I think it would be ludicrous for the Suns and the Kings to trade a player and a pick to sign Jonathan Kuminga to a $22.5 million contract for the next 4 seasons. Now, I will say with the $22.5 million, that is not necessarily as large as, say, I was going to compare him to Andrew Wiggins, right? Because Andrew Wiggins, he received a big contract years ago that he didn't live up to. It's not to the magnitude of that, because Wiggins, against the salary cap, the percentage was much larger, right, than Kuminga. But Kuminga, that deal does $22.5 million for Kuminga. That screams to me either a deal that cannot be moved in the future, or a deal that's thrown into a trade later on in time where you're thinking, oh, $22.5 million for Kuminga, and then here's this young player attached, and then another player, and all of a sudden you're trading 3 players for a $30-40 million player for the Kings, and Kuminga is one of those players, or the Suns. You can say the Suns or the Kings. We don't know where Kuminga is going to end up at the end of all of this. However, the situation, very, very interesting. Very interesting. But I think that's going to do it for us here on CTW Live, as we talked for 2 hours on the Suns, the Blazers, and the Warriors, as we said we were going to. Just going over some things here, though. Just looking out, making sure. I got to say this about the Suns, too. I got to say this one more. Bradley Beal, he didn't help the Phoenix Suns at the trade deadline, Why did the Phoenix Suns have to help Bradley Beal in finding another team this summer? Just saying. Just saying. I love my guy, Bradley Beal. Hometown guy, St. Louis. Always going to rep the guys from the Lou. Jason Tatum, Bradley Beal, Jordan Goodwin, right? Tyler Cook, all the St. Louis guys out there. David Lee, right? Caleb Love on the Blazers. All these St. Louis guys I'm going to rep. But Bradley Beal didn't exactly help the Suns at the deadline when it came to his no-trade clause, and the Suns trying to get off his deal then. And yet the Suns helped Bradley Beal find another situation come summertime. So I'm not exactly certain why the Suns needed to do that. But that is going to do it for us here on CTW Live. We got one in. It's supposed to be an hour, but it's 2 hours. That's what we do here on this program because we love to talk about basketball. All right, folks, basketball is my favorite sport. I love to dribble the ball up and down the court. As I believe Curtis Blow once said, right? Curtis Blow. Direct quote from Curtis Blow to close this one off here. However, that is going to do it for us here on CTW Live, of course. Got to get back to the studio here to actually close it out on the side. Got to let it load here. But that is going to wrap this live stream up as we can just do it from here. Like we could just do it from up here. Got to load all this stuff on the side, but we'll just do it from up here. All right, folks, that's it for me here on CTW Live. As I always say, thank you all for watching, and do not forget to subscribe to the Celtics Talk Weekly YouTube channel. Do not forget to go follow the Celtics Talk Weekly Instagram page, and don't forget to also follow the Celtics.everyday Instagram page. That is my page out there, and don't also forget to follow Celtics Nation Rise. That's Griffin's account out there on Instagram, also has a YouTube account himself. So don't forget to like, follow, and subscribe the Celtics Nation Rise YouTube channel along with the Celtics Talk Weekly YouTube channel. And I think that does it for all the plugs there at the end of this live. However, as I always say, thank you all for watching. I am your host, Seamus Zarlingo, and of course, go, as the music will come back here, go Celtics.